In 1913, there would have been about 10,000 children in institutional or reform system care in Ireland. There were 75 institutions in the country that took these children in. The biggest would have been Artane. Artane took children from Dublin, from inner city Dublin. There was 825 boys aged between 12 and 16 in Artane in 1913. Those under 12 went to Carriglea. There was about 270 of those. Girls were in Golden Bridge. There were many, many institutions in Leinster, and when they reached full capacity, the children were sent out to wherever there was capacity in the rest of the country. A lot of the inner city children from Dublin ended up going out to Letterfrack in Connemara, and once they went there, they didn't see their families again, because these families couldn't afford to travel the length of the country to visit children, and that was the one thing all of these children had in common. They were all poor. Middle-class children didn't tend to end up in industrial schools. And the theme tonight and the society that was portrayed in this performance tonight gives you some idea of how this system would have prospered, because the poor were somehow regarded as tantamount to criminals. They were seen as almost responsible, as culpable for their position. There was something sins of the father kind of vibe. And they were despised, they were distrusted, they were rejected by society, by law, by church, by media, and by employers. And we had witnesses coming in who talked to us about the humiliation and the degradation and the belittlement that they experienced day in, day out. They were afforded no personal dignity. They lived with shame and mortification. It scarred them as deeply, and some of them more so than the sexual and physical abuse a lot of them suffered. And these were innocent children. These were just children that had been orphaned or abandoned or were just plain unlucky. And when you look at the kind of society that was portrayed here, you can completely understand how this system grew and grew. Imagine the pain and heartbreak of a parent who's watching their child be committed to an institution for the whole of their childhood because they can't afford to care for them, or they are deemed unable to care for them, or they are deemed unsuitable. We saw letters from parents pleading for the return of their children, and it was heart-wrenching. And the overwhelming sense you got was a sense of powerlessness. And such a strong theme in The Risen People. Being powerless is a very frightening place to be. And these children and these parents were powerless. It deprived them of all human dignity. It made them vulnerable to abuse. They expected no better. They felt they deserved it. And if there's one thing that we must protect ourselves against, it is that feeling of powerlessness. But I would say, and not everybody would agree with me, I would say in conclusion that I think that as a nation, we should be proud of how we faced the legacy of our past. We did give a forum to people who had had no voice. We heard them, we listened to them, but more importantly, we believed them. We believed them. And I think that as a nation we grew up when we did that. I think that we became empowered, and if there's one thing that I took away from my whole experience of dealing with that issue, it was that we must never, ever again allow power go unchallenged in this country.
The gist of this is that we shall talk for 20 minutes or so. I was going to say the three wise men, but it's only two wise men. We're waiting on the third. So we'll talk for around 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the floor for the final few minutes. So if you do have questions, please remember them, and we'll address them at the end of the discussion. So let me introduce the Holy Trinity of two here. Jimmy Fay, director, and Colin Dunne, movement director. And we're just waiting on Conor, composer and musical director, who's been sitting on stage all night. He's probably just catching his breath. So there's a lot of directors in that title, but we'll get to that in a bit. Jimmy, my first question is to you, and it's the title of this talk, of this post-show talk. A play with music, but it's not a musical. Explain.
Okay, well, I mean, the first thing is that Fiach rang me about 2 years, or a year and a half, a little less than 2 years ago, and he said, have I read Arisen People? And I sensed the gig, and I said, yes, it's great. And he said, no, read it. So I thought, okay, so I read it, and it's not a great play, okay? I thought, this is Conor, who was brilliant over there. Yeah, so it's not a great play. So I just thought, okay, how do you go about this? And Fiach then said something really interesting. He said, I'd like you to work with Colin Dunne on this. And I really like Colin's work on Christ Deliver Us. He did with Wayne Jordan here, the Tom Kilroy play. So that would be a great match. So we did a workshop in September where we worked with the script. September a year ago. Yeah, and we worked on the script. And the script is big and clunky and stuff, but by that time I kind of read, not all, but I was wading into it. I've since finished it. Padraig Yates' brilliant book, September 1913. And we were looking at what Plunkett had done, and it seemed to play the script, which was the only way we could get, was a photocopy, seemed a little bit modern. So, as we were working on it, we kind of realised there's no way that they would say the word fuck in 1950s on the Abbey stage. They'd say it in 1913, I mean, that's definitely true, but they wouldn't say it then. And, working on it, and that kind of made me think that there must have been an earlier script. So Mairead Delaney went into the archives and she found the very first script, that James Plunkett had written by himself, and then obviously it became obvious that the Sheridans or Jim Sheridan particularly, had a hand in rewriting it. Now, the weird thing about, when I looked at both of them, the stuff that I thought Jim Sheridan had done, and he had done a lot of really good stuff, I thought he'd done a lot of Brechtian stuff, but actually, like the opening when they sing "When Larkin Came to Dublin Town" and stuff, that was actually in the script, in Plunkett's script. And Plunkett had about 2-3 songs, I think, and Sheridan had added 2 more, so there was about 5 or 6 in the script that we read. Anyway, we worked together. We worked a lot of movement and on Colin's movement. Colin worked a lot in movement. I worked in staging, but we worked in kind of shaping it and trying to find a story and whatever else. And we realised that this would probably take a couple of more songs. So then I asked Conor Linehan to come in, and Conor got, well, he can talk himself in a moment himself, but he got excited about kind of, maybe writing a lot of music to it and stuff. I didn't have time to make. See, the thing is, I began to read Strumpet City again, right? And just on that, Strumpet City became really important to me, right? And I realised that we were only looking at a tiny aspect of it, and I thought it would be great to do Les Mis in Strumpet City, okay? Really go for it, and anyway, that was going to be impossible, and we were kind of looking at the skeleton that we had, and Fiach and Aidan kept saying cut and kind of shape the scenes you have, and the work Colin and I did, which is much more interesting, to throw out dialogue and to try and do things through what Colin was doing. And then as soon as Conor was coming in, because there was times where we would go add modern songs, we would go add like John Lennon's Working Class Hero, which we did a workshop in, which worked quite well for that, but we also felt that was wrong. Conor and I went down with her, and he wrote a couple of songs there, the Jip Jip song, because we looked at using music hall and those techniques, and a few other things, all the music, Jip Jip song, and Only the Horse and Money, because that was a phrase. I remember, like, with Aidan and me, we were looking at the phrase and we were thinking, that speech belonged to somebody else, a character I got rid of. I want to make the female character stronger. Hilda Faye's character, Mrs. Hennessy, has some of Mrs. Mulhall as well. Mrs. Mulhall is a character that just kind of weaved all the way through it. And I felt if we put them together, we'd make a stronger case for the women in the play. I felt that they had to be really strong dynamic as well. I don't know if any of that has answered your question, but I'm trying to get to music. Conor can explain what play with music is.
Well, you seem to be spending your time getting rid of stuff, because if you talk us through the versions that you had to edit and throw out, because Plunkett started this as pageantry, and then there's radio versions, and if you just talk us through that, and then we'll get on to your
Plunkett was
collaboration.
Jim Larkin's secretary in the 40s. And Larkin, I wrote about this in the programme, but basically Larkin was like already washed up by then, okay? His glory days were behind him. Plunkett was a committed socialist. He went to Russia and stuff like that in the 50s, I think. But anyway, before that, he was Larkin's secretary, and Larkin would tell him stories, the puffing pipes, and he'd tell him all this. And really, Plunkett knew very little about the lockout, because the lockout by then had been swamped over by the Rising, the rebellion, and then the War of Independence, and then the Free State. And so it kind of been forgotten that there was this kind of socialist almost revolution, like where people made, as a group, as a real dynamic group, made a stand for themselves. Because we just saw this wonderful Mary talk about never let power go unchallenged. Okay, that was one of the first times a society, a working class society, had absolutely challenged the power. Because the whole thing about Murphy is he felt that the workers should be grateful, because he had given them jobs and not very much money, but he had given them money and stuff. So this is why, this is a work of propaganda that we're doing, okay? Absolutely, it's not a round of peace, you're not trying to see it from each side. There wasn't time to do that, but mostly it's because I don't really believe it. I believe actually the workers would affect over at that time. But basically, Plunkett must have felt the same thing as well. He began to write pageants. Larkin died in '47 at a huge funeral, and he wrote things for the Union Hall then and Liberty Hall and stuff, and then he began to stitch it into play, and then eventually Rian Mooney, I think, or Hugh Hunt, I'm not sure, asked him to do a play for the Abbey, of that time. So he wrote a play, but he knew he wasn't finished with it. All these characters were gone on him, and they developed, and the best way that he was able to express it was as a novel, and to go back to Edward's the arrival of the King, 1908, 1907, I think. And then go from there. So he's basically looking at 7 years, from there to the beginning of the war, But it was a radio play because he was commissioner, he was a drama commissioner also in War II.
So a lot of this has been triggered because they shared an office space and Larkin would just stroll in.
I think so, yeah. I think it was he was only 21 or something at the time. Yeah. So I think he literally got a lot of it, I think, from Larkin himself. Those stories and the people around him, because they were all would have been, it was only 30 years later, 20 years later.
Conor, how do you create an original composition with all that kind of legacy, and how do you block out that interference and expectation?
With great difficulty. I decided, and very early on, that I can decide at start a conversation with myself about there's so much cultural and social legacy and baggage around these events that I refuse to be kind of intimidated by that to myself. So I thought otherwise I'll just never get started. So I just said I'm just going to really fire into it and get going. Anyone who does this sort of thing knows you start in a state of great confusion, and which slowly reveals itself. So the brief was really, a brief I was very happy to take on, was to be absolutely polystylistic and to be free and anachronistic in the way that the music's, and so of course we had that great 1913 instrument, the electric guitar. And it was a nice opportunity for me to pull together various strands of work I've done over the years. In earlier parts of the play, one of the things I kind of do is take some of these worker songs and kind of reframe them in the manner of kind of Hans Eisler or Kurt Weill. We thought this very propulsive kind of rhythm, which was quite interesting. We had Christy Moore in one night, and there's footage on YouTube as a young man with his guitar singing in Dublin City in 1930. So what he made of I don't know how much frankly he quite liked.
But he used the modern technology of tweeting that he liked it.
He did use the modern tweeting.
So there, he's way ahead of the game.
So that in the earlier parts, then Only the Horrors of Money was, it just struck me as a great line, and I said that's just got to be a song. So
where did that? Because I heard that was a trigger. Like, did you say that you came across it somewhere? Or?
No, it was in the line was in the play, and Hilda has that opening now in where we sing, she sings Odette, and that replaced another scene. It was a funeral. Mrs. Mulhall was giving out that larkin and stuff. Then, and rather than, she had only a hers of money, and she gives out about Lady Maxwell. Lady Maxwell never appears apart from that those lines in either any of the other versions, but she's a presence in the book. So I want to bring Lily in because prostitution, literally from the Abbey door here all the way to, where the point is, was like a brothel basically. Huge monster. Also, in June, I was reading a lot of Ulysses as well, the whole circuit thing, So, but Lily Maxwell is such a vibrant, and she's a survivor. She is in the novel as well. I thought she's so interesting that we should bring her in, And also counterpoints Pat a little bit. He's able to explain that. They have some really good dialogue about such stuff. But for example, that's what Conor were able to do, is take phrases in the play and subvert them or change them or radicalize them, that they didn't necessarily have to be just told, that they could do something with them.
Well, talking about, say, this collaboration of three, you mentioned yourself and Conor went up to Anne McCarrick. Colin, how do you write music then? How movement? You don't. That's exactly what you don't do. That'd be interesting though. How do you write movement though?
The play was a score. That's what it is. The play's not a play. We were talking about as a score. We talked about that really early on with Fig and Aideen as well. That this play, what we have now is a long process of bringing things together and throwing things out and stuff like that, and adding music and trying to keep everything it's all doing our jobs. Trying to tell a coherent story. But to use the play to bounce off it, none of that movement feels in any of the other versions, none of the songs were.
We have a kind of deluxe box set version of all the stuff that's discarded as special bonuses. There's a great song called Broken Hearts, or Broken Heads and Broken Homes, which just we finally got the chop in around week 3 or week 4 of the rehearsals. We'll do it.
Sorry.
How do you?
Well, I think how do you write movement? Just one thing that I kind of want to say is, and I think it was a big thing for us all to kind of face, and it certainly informed, it was the first thing that informed what the movement might and could not be, is the fact that, from day one, Fiach was very clear that this was going to be a piece with 10 actors. And when you read The Risen People, when you look at the epicness of the event, you would imagine if you were going to do this in the theatre, that you'd want 10 maybe main character actors and then 15 extras to kind of do, there's so many kind of epic scenes and events throughout it. And so that was the immediate kind of, aesthetic thing for me, in terms of how do we reimagine a lot of these events with what then turned out to be 9 actors and 2 musicians. So that even the production itself had a kind of, I suppose, an austere kind of budget. It's not a lavish production, and that really helped kind of us kind of zone in on what was possible and what wasn't. And so, and also in terms of the play, there's very little movement written in the play. There's no scenes apart from things like the riot or maybe down at the docks with the priests and taking the children, which are more kind of traditionally kind of action scenes rather than movement scenes. There were no dance scenes. There wasn't movement indicated in the play. So I
does
suppose
that
in a way
happen in the rehearsal room? So does that?
Yeah, in a way that was a good thing because you could start from scratch and you could start with and we started with a blank piece of paper. The play was always going to be at the center of this production, and then the songs obviously kind of added and supported it. And then it was, well, what is the role of movement and where can movement support, the narrative and also take us outside of the narrative, not to, certainly by the time we started production, I didn't feel like, there was going to be big movement scenes that really interrupted the flow of the play. But, how can movement and just the energy of movement support the narrative and support those events? So, I did very little teaching of movement. A lot of the scenes or movement came out of, I suppose, directing the cast, so that a lot of the movement came out of them. And we would kind of improvise certain scenes, and you would throw ideas at them and have the movement come out of their bodies rather than me imposing movement upon them, just to see then if the energy of a particular scene was right or if the dynamic of it was right, And if we felt that the energy of it was right through improvising it, then we could kind of leave that alone, that was right, and then kind of go back to it and build the layers so it became a little bit kind of more specific about what it was. You know, so it's, yeah, I mean, it's different for me to work with actors than it is to work with dancers. It's the same process, but it's different, you know, and everybody can move. But I was very clear that I didn't want to impose a physical dance or movement language upon them in terms of teaching them steps and movement. You know, that it would be a little bit more organic in terms of coming from them as an ensemble.
Because the choreography is kind of, it's threaded throughout, like there's not one actor that walks across the stage, they stride. Like all the blocking seems to be like, they're like pawns on a chessboard. It's like, do you just...
I wouldn't say that to the actor.
But it just feels that like, that your kind of fingerprint is all over it as well, over the blocking as well, you know, it's movement.
We talked about this, I hate to use the word blocking in theatre because it's the word block shouldn't, you know, it's not a useful room in the dressing room. I know what you mean, but in terms of how things kind of get
it's more
set
kind of a directed language versus a movement language.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, see that, you know, luckily it was a very fluid thing in the rehearsal room. You know, there are scenes which would have, you know, dialogue and necessarily and needed movement, but not dance, not big movement, but staging, which is in movement, and they had music in it, and it's not any one person's kind of role, and you know that's where the three things kind of come together, and that's hopefully where you can step over your line, or you know, we all have an opinion about. I have an opinion about text and the rhythm of it, or about music, and we all do in each other's area, and that's, you know, hopefully you either have a good fight and you sort it out, or you don't fight and you still sort it out, but hopefully it's sorted out.
An interesting thing about the show is that the timings of the show are relayed to us every evening, and they are always exactly the same every night. They're 102 for the first half, and 101 for the second half, and the variable is usually of 2 or 3 minutes that can be always exactly the same every night, because there is so much for everybody to do, and so much for everyone to, so many marks to hit, to be there, to do this, to sing that, to play this, that there's really no room for slippage whatsoever. Once it starts going, it just kind of goes with the train all the way through, and it's just 102, 101.
I suppose having you on stage the whole time, I'm sure that's it's very demanding for you, but in a way you're kind of...
I'm driving them on.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about the fabulous cast, the fabulous ensemble cast, and what was it like working with them, with actors with instruments. It sounds like a horror film, but I'm sure it wasn't a horror at all to work with them, but like, because they're actors who can play music, they're not musicians, much like they're not dancers. I really like these actors. I feel as if I'm discrediting them, but what was it like working with the ensemble?
We spent a long time casting, you know.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about a lot, you know. We all fought our corners. Like, I wanted really great actors. You know, but we all agreed at the end of the day. Like, I mean, we cast it right down to the wire as well. Like, you know, we let things go.
But because it was only 9, you know, it's really crucial.
The 9 thing came because of the workshop. You know, Feig did say to me, "Can we do it?" You know, well, it came because Colin wanted me to be a musician. You know, like, I mean, frankly, I mean, there's a couple of things. There's like there's just the spiritual thing as well of doing a show about poverty on the Abbey, you know. And like 5 years ago, he may have thrown a lot of money on it. The whole idea was to take money out of it as much as possible. And I'm not talking actual fees, but I'm talking the set, you know, like Alison's set and all that kind of stuff. Bring everything down to bare bones, like bare boards, you know, to keep it austere, you know, kind of, you know, like even not a whole lot of musicians out there, okay? And still not
for a second musician. What? For a second musician. And
that much.
Oh, I did.
Anyway.
This music actually needs.
Anyway, yes, you didn't.
But that felt very right for what this production was going to be. I mean,
yeah, but the actors are brilliant. And some of the actors were before, you know, like I worked a lot with Joe Hanley, Kate, and Phelan and stuff, you know, and Hilda, and they just all, like, one thing, I mean, this always sounds mad, but we did, like, even I did yoga. Colin did yoga every morning, and it was a brilliant way to stitch a company together. The main thing you always want to get in whatever show is a company, and it's not always possible because sometimes, you know, things get in the way, like egos, or, you know, it's time. There's an equality about this, you know, going from Lloyd you know, to Phelan and to Hilda and stuff like that, that, you know, everybody was given attention and everybody was, you know, they may not, you know, sometimes be the greatest singers, but they really sing with passion, you know, and some of them are brilliant singers, you know. You really want everyone to be able to play instruments, and most of them can.
Most of them can, and those that can't play the spoons.
Well, I thought it was a triangle. I thought the spoons was quite good.
Spoons are good.
Spoons are an instrument.
Spoons are an instrument, yes. And possibly there's a correlation between, you know, the kind of voices that I was looking for, and the kind of movement that we weren't looking for. You weren't looking for dancers, and I wasn't looking for musical theatre singers. I love all the voices. Actually, I love everybody's voice in this show. And they're so different. And the three women in the show, each of their voices are so individual and unique and powerful. And so I wanted to really put that choric three-part right in, kind of at the centre of the score from beginning to end. Really, I just to thread that through the sound of these three voices almost as a kind of a chorus. Because they're so strong together and so strong individually as well.
We're kind of tight on time. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, we have a question midway.
A question for Jimmy. Why did you choose to use projections throughout the show?
Oh yeah, sorry, we'll talk about that. It's Neil O'Driscoll, who's a critic, filmmaker, animator. Basically, because at that time, okay, 1913, okay, it's not so much that film was even beginning. There was film houses here, but the main thing was the cartoons. The Irish workers, the newspaper Larkin ran, stuff like that, ran a whole lot of cartoons by Ernest, I can't remember his second name. He died in 1916, but he was an amazing cartoonist who did both those things you see. You see Murphy turning into the bat, or the big black bird, and then you see the shark socialism, which struck me as a very poignant way to kind of do the Favourite Fathers, the children being stopped from going to Liverpool to better homes or to homes in England. And I just felt like, I mean, this is where the people communicated, and that the best way to show it, rather than talking about it and saying, you see the cartoon, was actually show it to you, okay? And also because, you know, another thing that we're talking about, like, you know, the influence of music and movement and stuff, like at that time, the early part of the 20th century is really interesting for innovation and techniques, and, you know, people playing with dissonance and being very subversive, you know, breaking away from kind of romantic time. Even before the war of 1914, they began to kind of like experiment. I mean, obviously you get Dadaism later on as well. And so all this stuff, if you look at Marhold and Picasker, who was a big influence for me on it, Picasker was Brecht's director. Like he worked with Brecht right at the beginning in the 20s. And he used a lot, in those days, he used a lot of projection and really rough staging. So I thought it would be interesting. It's always been an ambition. I did Arturo Ui a few years ago, and I remember wanting to use film in it, and I don't think I did actually. I can't remember. But in this, I thought it would be really important for these things. And also having Conor there on the piano playing the thing, it just felt like you're, you know, for a moment in the movie theatre. But I hope it wasn't kind of. Were you approving?
I just felt the weekend was in it. It's interesting, just from a photography background to even have the images there of 1913, you know, as a memory, as a big open memory. It's kind of interesting the weekend is in it. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. The Church Street thing as well is like it was a long. That wasn't in the play, but it was something that we felt we needed to, you know, such an important part of the narrative of, you know, of our history of that, like that idea that houses would be allowed to collapse on people. You know, we need to bring that in. And we thought at one stage it was going to be a big movement piece. I remember we were talking about it. This is one way we were kind of experimenting. We were with everybody all over and people tumbling over each other and stuff. And then that just got distilled right down to what I think is quite beautiful and haunting is when Simon rolls out. But I felt to make that clear, we needed to kind of project a little film, and Neil made that little film there. That looked a bit Eisenstein, because you got your one going, you know, like this.
Yeah, we have another question. Convention
I'd
Centre.
just ask, well, first of all, congratulations. I really enjoyed the second time tonight, and
Fair
well
play.
worth coming back again. When I heard this was going to come on, I didn't know how it was going to work. A play about. Yes, but it did. One disappointment I had was that we didn't get the script. We have got scripts
In the programme?
Program. It's been great going home to read, whatever you think. And particularly as a singer and as a songwriter, I'd love to have the possibility of having to listen to the songs again, to hear the songs again. So, nowadays you don't even need to produce a CD, but it would be great if the songs were available on iTunes, because I can honestly say that some of these songs, if people heard them again, they could become part of people's repertoire. The same way as Monto, when George D. Hodnett wrote that for whatever review it was back in the 50s, and it just became part of the canon, if you like.
Yeah.
And even the discarded songs. You've made me curious now, and I'd love to hear those.
Oh no, you should get Broken Heads. It's
Yeah,
brilliant.
we're hoping before we all disperse in 2.5 weeks' time that we will one afternoon sit down and record all the songs, and we'll make them available to people on the Abbey SoundCloud channel.
I mean, another huge influence of this as well, Francis Devine? Conor and I went to a talk he did in the City Hall, where they sang songs from that time that weren't, like, for example, Monto at one stage was an idea in this. I don't think it was around when Conor came on board, but it's such a great, vivid, the lyrics and that are really good. But it's 50s, and it's kind of Joan Littlewood, and it is that kind of that time. So some of the lyrics that we heard that you hear tonight, like there's 2 songs that made an appearance in the production week. Kate's song, which is
Kate's early song, Toiling and Moiling, where
she steals a hat and stuff like that.
That's
But the lyrics in there are amazing, that we found just the week before, and the one Comrades that Hilda does, because we were doing something there that wasn't really working, and Conor had the idea, like if she sang the song, I think it was a different scene, but we stitched it into that scene.
Yeah, I was slightly troubled that there was an overly lyrical sequence of songs running through from Phelim's little music hall song through Charlotte's ballad and then through, and I felt that I wanted a song that was angry and sour at this point, so we just at speed. This is how it goes.
She learned it on the first preview.
She learned it.
But the lyrics in that are
Yeah.
brilliant. Comrades, it's amazing. But all those songs are from Francis Devine has them. Those particular ones, not the Poors, which I think is, probably what you're looking for as well.
Are there any other questions? Yes, over here.
Thanks. It's a question wrapped up in a comment, and the comment is, I would be fascinated to hear from the company, from the actors, because knowing that they went and played in the jail the other day and got such a brilliant, people getting the jokes, getting the songs, etc., to know what it was like for them touring away from this stage and what it's going to be like. Vic mentioned that he's going out somewhere else.
Go to the Larkin Centre on Monday, or to Larkin.
So I would love to, because the companies here come and go. It's not as if it's an ensemble and they're going to sit on there and everywhere they tour telling people what it's like being their ensemble. And in particular, given the manic spin this morning was going on, almost as if the theatre isn't seen by the people it's meant for. So I'm really interested in touring. But a very particular question is about Luke, the actor who played, Lloyd, the actor who played Joe. Just because when he was in Anna's Productions version of, like last time I saw him, he was thrusting a piece of paper into my hand, having said, "Who can read here? Read me that." And it was the letter that they'd been asked to sign for the strike breaking, because it was this very situation, but done close up with an audience of 6 in the house in Henrietta Street. Mm-hmm. And so I'd be fascinated to know what it's like for him, since Louise Lowe had said how they have a memory of each production somewhere hidden in the next one. It's almost like you've got that production hidden in yours. What it was like for him being in this. So I have to ask you, what was it like working with him? Did it come to bear on this at all, Jimmy, that he just spent the last, I don't know how long, living
Well, we went to see that show, and it was brilliant, obviously we went to see it like late in the process. We went to see it in August, and then Lloyd came in and read. Like, I mean, we saw a lot of people, but Lloyd, I mean, we didn't cast him because he was in that show. We cast him because he was right for what we needed to do, But I like the idea that he has echoes of that came in, There's something very I mean, I didn't know Lloyd at all before this year, and I found him, I find all these actors very honest, very straightforward, and they're very engaged in this whole process, the whole way that we work together, and also in the team and in the narrative of what this play is about, And Lloyd definitely came in with like a beautiful sort of naivety, I think, like me, about it's the Abbey and stuff like that. And then it was only when it was opening that you're not in a small place anymore. He had to develop, a kind of performance that got a little bit bigger than. I mean, he did actually. I mean, he had to hit like the back rows and stuff, vocally and stuff, and he did it with a bump, I think, So I think he had a really good, like, it was good for him to be in both shows, actually, I think. But he's a different character in this as well. I mean, he's a very good actor. He's very versatile.
I made a very deliberate choice that Lloyd would be the youngest member of the company, would be the first person to step out and sing. I just felt it was appropriate that he would come out, and he's got this absolute belter of a voice, and I just loved the idea immediately of the youngest member by some distance coming out and just filling the theatre with this great strong voice, and I think that was vindicated. I think he's a very strong one.
But it's interesting because I know what you're saying as well. It is good to acknowledge other productions. Like Louise and I are good friends and stuff. It's good to be able to bounce things off. Like, I mean, with a new, it's very particular. It's like it can only be 3 to 6 people, and that's the experience. It's very raw, very real. Like getting in your hand, having to read it, all that kind of stuff. Whereas here you have to sit down, that you take it. Like, we're trying to bring it to you as much as possible, but it's possibly more conventional, whatever else you're playing, even though we're playing with technique. And it's good to echo other shows, I think, sometimes, to be in partnership with them as opposed to trying to pretend they didn't exist, Do
you want to say a word about the Wheatfield experience, Conor, or what that experience was like?
Yeah, as a company, we all felt absolutely exhausted the next day. It was a very complex experience, in parts exhilarating, in parts very melancholic. And we were absolutely delighted and relieved by the response of the prisoners. It was really moving for us. But also, we all felt very sad at the waste of their lives and the waste of the lives that they had affected.
Yeah, like the Noble Call was done by 9 basically young men under 40, I think, and at least 2 of them had been in there for 13 to 14 years. They were lifers, and they wrote an amazing song.
They wrote a brilliant song.
Really,
They're very, very talented guys. It was great when we went in. They were rehearsing the song in the afternoon, and we very spontaneously applauded at the end, and we were able to just go up and start chatting to them immediately. So that was just very fortuitous, and yeah.
What was their responses to
Well, I mean, here's the thing, because afterwards, we talked to the governor, he says, because at the beginning I asked, there's this brilliant prison guard called Lorraine, and I got there about 12 o'clock, and I was there from 12 to 11, and by the end of it, my head was just, like, we're in there and it's airless, and you haven't got a mobile phone, you can't communicate with anybody from the outside world. Doing the show, so you feel quite claustrophobic. Anyway, this is Lorraine, she said, I have no idea how it's going to go. Because I presumed this would be fine, we do it, be polite, and then, we'll do a good show, and then they'll applaud. But they really went for it, like me.
Previous show had been basically
eaten alive.
Had been eaten alive. There's sort of thing of batteries.
And this show lent itself to it, Yeah. But this show lent itself to it because the actors again were so ready, Like, I mean, the actors were so ready, and I tried to do a show about 15 years ago at Abbey Hill, and then one of the actors complained and the whole thing got pulled and it didn't happen. So the bravery of the actors in this, and not bravery, I mean just the actual heartfelt, enthusiasm, I think there was no problem. I was there at 12, and then it was like, when are they coming, yeah? And then you could hear the change. You couldn't hear the change, you could just hear the gates opening, you know? And then eventually a prisoner came in and started going, look at them, they're there. But then what was brilliant is they were doing a novel called These 9 Actors, you know? A few of them lifers, you know? Some hard men, you know, all that kind of stuff. But they were singing this really tender song. And then all the actors came in, just as they were beginning it, you know, and Conor and stuff, you know. And as you said, it was immediate, like there was just a great meeting. They were basically on the stage, so there was no, when are they coming, who's arriving, there was just a great, they walked, basically, prisoners were there, or the inmates, or wherever, you know, like, I don't know what the term is, you know, because the governor was calling them inmates, other prisoners. But basically, the actors and the men met, you know, and it was just, it felt quite warm, you know, like it felt like this is good, we're doing the work, we're doing a piece of theatre for each other, actually, in a way, you know. But it's true, like, I mean, somebody had said, like, can you cut the script because they can't really be in info because they can't really leave, you know. So as you can see, the script is, and like the thing is, I didn't really want to, I didn't know at this stage what to cut, you know, how we would cut it, or we cut the opening movement a little bit, you know, but only because the stage was small, that was all.
Yeah, that left me as the first person to walk on the stage, so thanks for that.
Anyway, but the reaction was superb. It was really, really good, and I felt it was like heartfelt. It wasn't they were doing it work, because afterwards we went on a tour with the governor, and he was saying, like, glad I went well because I've seen them eat things live.
It was an honest response. If there's one final question, I'll give it to you, or we might shut it down. We will shut it. Do we? Sorry, yes?
I think if you're ever going on tour outside Ireland, you should take it to Russia.
Russia?
I think it would resonate with the Russians. I think they'd like it.
I'd love to go to Russia. I'd love to go to America as well. I'd love to go to, you know, everywhere.
Okay, I think we might leave it there.
There's a lady there that was looking. Do you want to ask?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. I just want to say I really enjoyed the play. I think the play itself, with the music and the movement and the spirit, really truly represents what it means to be Irish, and even through poverty and disease and everything else, Irish people, I don't know what it is, it's something inside them that really they have to say, no, we'll keep going. I was just curious, how important was it for you as a director to really take from not just like a theatre sense, but also a historical sense, these were real people, but to take it from people like on a script, like characters in a script, but as real people, and portray it on stage, like to people who might not know the story or the 1913 lockout, as like to fully explain.
Well, that was one thing we all talked about, because we kind of knew by now,
yeah.
Because I thought originally this play was going to go on in August, September, but by now that everybody would be like lockout-itist, you know, like they would have had a lot of it by now, you know, which they have had, right? So it gave us a certain liberty to kind of, you know, to not have to educate in that sense, to say, you know, all those kind of titles that came in, economics and all that, you know, to make them as bald and as possible, because like there's one word I really regret losing: austerity, which was there, and we put winter instead, you know, and I like austerity, but I listened to good counsel actually, and I think it is better with winter, okay? Because I think you get the sense of austerity, because we've all gone through that for the last 5, you've just grown up with that, like 5, 6, like we've all gone from this kind of mad time where people seem to have money, even though I never had, but like, you know what I mean? And then into this absolutely devastating time, you know? And even though we're told you turn on the radio, things are getting better, you feel it. So I think there's a real empathy with the people from that time 100 years ago. Like this next decade is really interesting, going from 13 all the way to 22, and probably beyond, but like, I mean, definitely over that next 10 years, this next 10 years is interesting, because stuff happened 100 years ago that still absolutely shakes us right now, you know? I don't know if that answers anything that you asked, but I just think that, you know, Conor or Colin might be better, but thank you.
We might leave it there. Thank you very much for saying, and thank you very much for